Good morning, everybody, and hello. It's Tom Kissack, author of Jonathan's Tales, picking up the story of the orange and the grapefruit. This part two. At the end of part one, we saw the outrageous goading of the grapefruit by the orange, and I quote the last sentence in part one. Excuse me. The orange is speaking. So, all that said, my dear grapefruit, we might we might all acknowledge, because it is sadly crystal clear for us all to see, you are of great ignorance, but with my help a little less so, and thus I rest my case. The orange then cast a disdainful glance towards the grapefruit, a glance clearly indicating that he was looking down upon him. Astute observers might immediately note the double entendre implicit in the use of looking down, as the orange was, of course, physically looking down upon the grapefruit, but also that the orange was in his own mind's eye occupying such a commanding height of moral high ground that he felt sure his recent little contretemps with his adversary might, I dare say, be safely put to bed, in both senses of the word. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Alas, all would not go to plan for the orange, and the author is minded to recall a phrase that sums up the orange's hubris on this matter, the best laid plans of men and mice. Of course, a discerning reader is quite entitled to comment that such a phrase points erroneously to a point of view that the orange planned from the start the grapefruit's humiliation. In reflection, acknowledging this point of view, we might all agree that there seemed little planning involved, for he, the orange that is, was carried along by events, partly by his own situation and partly by the nature of his own character. Character or otherwise, the orange made a big mistake. As in all walks of life, we must take due care, given we meet different people along the way and have really no idea what their destiny might be with us, be it beneficial or harmful. And so it was with the grapefruit. He was certainly not a character that would, once cruelly provoked, lie down easily. It was the orange's befitting fate that this was going to be so. The grapefruit had remained for a while now silent, passively refusing to be provoked in response to the barbs of multiple insults the orange threw in his direction. Comments that would have stirred others to action much sooner. The grapefruit listened initially with interest as the first subtle and then not so subtle jibes flowed his way. In time something stirred, or you might say snapped, replacing his usual kind and placid nature with a rising anger. As this anger reached full throttle, there was a tsunami tide of desire to check, rectify, and set the record straight in some way. Indeed, in any way, to pay back the slights he suffered at the hands of the orange. Insults he realized must not, indeed cannot, be allowed to go unanswered. As we have said, the grapefruit by nature was placid, but suffering what can only be described as uncalled for maltreatment by the orange's sharp and quick-witted tongue prompted in his mind a famous saying, "If you prick me, do I not bleed?" Besides, it was not just the orange's cruel words. Excuse me. More fuel was poured on the fire as the grapefruit caught the eye of the orange looking down upon him. He saw a face annoyingly smug and wearing a superciliously broad grin. a grin that stung the grapefruit in undeserved humiliation. And a thought slowly arose in the latter's mind. Somehow, some way, he must take the wind out of this orange's sail and bring his persecutor down a peg or two. He in his heart of hearts knew there was only one way to deal with this silver-tongued tormentor. And so the story continues. "Oh," exclaimed the grapefruit, "I've quite had enough of you telling me I'm uncultured. I cannot take much more, seeing you so repugnantly self-satisfied. So, Orange, I think we must settle your account with me. I give you to a challenge." The Orange, hearing this, snorted out a forced laugh, and then replied, "Challenge? Challenge. A squirting challenge," said the grapefruit. Without further ado, the grapefruit started shuffling and pushing and shoving his way to the top of the bowl. In his haste to rise as quickly as possible, and not thinking as he levered himself upon others, pushing this banana one way and that apple another, he managed to unbalance the fruit bowl, which toppled over on its side. Apples strung across the table, and bananas too. One banana who'd been sleeping, now unceremoniously dumped on the table, snapped open his eyes and shouted, "What? I want to go to sleep." The lemon, also expelled from the bowl, sighed, resignedly saying, "Here we go again." She was the cleverest in the bowl and knew what was about to happen. The orange, quite oblivious to the major part he had played in the current upset, started jumping up and down, exclaiming gleefully, "A duel! A duel!" Given this open and apparent eagerness of the orange to escalate matters, we must note, reader, there was something unconvincing in his excited manner. Being quite a savvy orange, something lodged deep in his mind, a lurking doubt that they were going into uncharted territory where anything could happen. At that moment, the grapefruit, who'd gathered himself up after tumbling around in the melee of rolling fruit, leapt high in the air. He had in his mind one sole intention: to squash and flatten the orange. Pelting downwards with a strange gleam in his eye, he screamed, "Geronimo!" I did enjoy saying that. Seconds later, there was a resounding splat as a grapefruit landed on the table. But the orange was too quick and skirted out of harm's way. Grapefruit, looking around and noting the fall, had failed to vanquish his foe, and to boot, split open his skin across half his body, jubilantly announced, "That's exactly what I intended anyway." Arching his now open flesh to the orange, he showered him with grapefruit juice from top to bottom. "Ah! Ah! I can't breathe!" screamed the orange. "Ah, do excuse me." And he, both to escape the grape juice pouring over him and also to put things on a level playing field, also leapt in the air, and landing back down, broke his own skin in a similar fashion to the grapefruit, before promptly squirting the grapefruit all over in a vicious orange juice salvo. They started having a battle, drenching one another in turn. The lemon, watching this pantomime of idiocy, yelled above the babel of sputtering attacks and counter-attacks, "This is ridiculous! Absolutely ridiculous!" "What?" said both the orange and the grapefruit simultaneously. The lemon's comments stopping both combatants in their tracks. "What do you mean, ridiculous?" asked the orange, and added, quite unabashedly, and in a classic example of the pot calling the kettle black. "You're being very cocksure and arrogant. It's ridiculous," repeated the lemon, ignoring the irony in the orange's reply. "I don't give a fig whether you were born in America, and I don't give a fig if you were born or brought up in Italy. You both have to get on. You're already ruined your lives." The grapefruit cast a quizzical glance at the orange and muttered, "Ruined our lives?" The orange took a more robust affront at this, exclaiming in undisguised pique, "Our lives?" And with that prompt, both fruits turned on the lemon and started squirting her. "Yeah!" excuse me, shouted the lemon as the juices cascaded over her. She immediately leapt up into the air to escape the unprovoked attack, but she was, as we have already mentioned, cleverer than the grapefruit and the orange. There was a little arrangement of knives on the table in a holder with the blades sticking upwards. She landed on one, crying out, "Ch!" The grapefruit and the orange started laughing. "Ah, that's stupid! She's hurt her bottom," mocked the orange. The orange's pleasure at seeing the lemon hurting herself had sadly for the orange jumped the gun, as we shall soon see. There was as yet unseen method in the lemon's apparent madness. She pushed herself up off the knife and, looking down at herself, smiled with satisfaction. All she had was a tiny little prick, a quite small hole in her skin from the pointed knife that had pierced her body. Jumping down, she rolled over and squirted the grapefruit and the orange directly in the eyes. A perfectly aimed gush streamed lethally from the small aperture in her skin. "Yuck! Ah! That's horrible! That's bitter! That's horrible!" howled the orange. The lemon smiled. She was quite aware that the lemon juice as a squirting liquid was the best of the best, for it stings the eyes. The orange had had enough already. Rubbing the juice from his smarting eyes, he rolled out of the lemon's squirting range. Moaning pathetically, for reasons of personal cowardice, that he was now hors de combat, now in relative safety, the orange urged the grapefruit to take up arms, shouting in lily-livered newfound enthusiasm, "Squirt her, grapefruit! Squirt her!" The grapefruit was more circumspect than the orange, and declined what he thought was an invitation to a lost cause. He remained perfectly silent. The orange, noting this deliberate inaction of the grapefruit, began thinking on his feet. He was, if anything, a survivor, having all through his short life manipulated others on his whims, and by often sometimes the skin of his teeth. Putting two and two together, he realized the lemon, being able to call at her disposal bitter stinging juices, had a good deal more clout than both him and the grapefruit together. He knew the game was up and decided to change tack, and more importantly, change sides too. Offering an olive branch to the lemon, he shouted anxiously, "Look, look, look! It's silly fighting like this. I've got a song! I've got a song!" Given this somewhat odd news, everybody calmed down, as they were quite bored watching the now three protagonists squirting each other. The lemon, seeing an opening to stop what she herself viewed as complete madness, said in a placatory tone, "OK, go on then, let's hear this song before we go to sleep," and then adding in a more chilling and prophetic words, mind you, you're ruined, both of you. You know that. Again, the grapefruit looked at the orange and said, whatever does she mean? Let us listen to the song first. I will then tell you, smiled the lemon. Listeners, I will now take a break and return to deliver the final part on the epic tale, The Orange and the Grapefruit. Bye bye for now.